So, Rabbi, I will just recognize that both Darina and Jesse have posted in chat that they are studying in memory of friends who died suddenly in the past couple of days. Isaac Tenenbaum, a 22-year-old student of Jesse's and Darina's friend, Marin Bodikoff, who died unexpectedly of a heart attack last week.
Oh, my goodness. Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be for a blessing, and we study today in their memory. Thank you for bringing them.
I have something that I found, if I might, that yesterday when we were studying, I blithely said, well, everybody has their Machzor. Let's just open the Machzor to Psalm 51 and we can study out of it. And I will just share quickly that this is Psalm 51 in the Lev Shalem Machzor. And then someone pointed out, I think it was Ben in my group, who said, wait a second, the Lev Shalem Machzor has verses 1 through to 19, but this is a psalm with 21 verses. What happened to the last two verses of Psalm 51 in the Lev Shalem Machzor? So I went to the source and I wrote to Rabbi Jan Urbach. I thought, I know her. You know, we can't ask the person who put together the book of Psalms, but we can ask the person who put together the Machzor. And here is her answer, which is not quite complete, but is very interesting. It's what I got. And she said, I don't remember the discussion of this. It might have been a decision made very early before my involvement on the project, or it might be an error. I don't think so. That was subsequently corrected. Ed Feld might know. Also, if you look, it fits much better without those two verses. They would have had to go to a second page. But if I were to try to explain it, I'd suggest that the last two verses of Psalm 51 really undermine the entire rest of the Psalm and have less of a place on Yom Kippur. They actually don't fit at all and make me wonder whether there's scholarship to suggest that they were a later addition added by censors uncomfortable with the rejection of the temple offerings in favor of prayer and teshuvah. So the things that you find out in this class and the things that are pointed out to you by your partners in Chavruta could be
fabulous. Well, and that's a great example. So let's say this, and again, I won't go into that, but so this Machzor gets passed around, and maybe future generations studying the Psalm from this Machzor don't even know that there were those other two verses. That's what ends up happening. But beautiful, that's great, and that's a great example. We don't know these things, but that's, as I said, some people argue that those last two verses are from a different psalm or a later edition, but good for you guys. I'm so proud of you. This makes me just quell. So I hope you noticed in your Machzor, if you have your Machzor, on page 42, if you folks can take out your Lev Shalem, I'm just going to point out a couple of things about the placement, just so when we get there. So you see page 42 has Psalm 8. This is where we do the Psalm of the day. Psalm 8 is the Psalm for Rosh Hashanah, which is it's also known as the creation Psalm, which is why it's the Psalm for Rosh Hashanah. And remember last year when we studied Psalm 8, we used many of your offerings for the recordings before services for Rosh Hashanah. And then the next page, see, this is all the Psalm for the day section. The next page on 43 is the Yom Kippur Psalm, Psalm 51. Now forever, for the rest of your lives, for these days of awe, you will have some relationship to both the Psalm for Rosh Hashanah, Psalm 8, and the Psalm for Yom Kippur, Psalm 51. And the next page on 44 has the Psalm for the whole season, Psalm 27. And there is some discussion in the, and by the way, if you turn to the next page, page 45, which is the beginning of Psukei de Zimra, what Psalm is there? Anybody have page 30? Page 40. 30. Psalm 30, also the Psalm which we are so beloved in the community. So that whole section, you now have some beginning familiarity with these very important Psalms, these 4 or 5 Psalms. Some people have argued, by the way, that Psalm 51 should be the Psalm for the whole season instead of Psalm 27. That there's a way that the themes of Psalm 51 are really the Psalms for the season. As you can see, that opinion didn't hold, end up winning, whatever the word is. And so we have, for the days of awe, we have 3 basic Psalms. The Psalm 27, which is the psalm for the whole season, which we say starting at the first of the month of Elul, and we continue to the holiday of Hoshana Rabbah. Some people stop saying it on Yom Kippur. Some people stop saying it on the beginning of Sukkot. There are different traditions. The recitation of these psalms is a oops, sorry, let me turn this off. Is a tradition, not a, so, but the three psalms for the season, Psalm 27, Psalm 8 for Rosh Hashanah, and Psalm 51 for Yom Kippur. Okay, shall we, there are a couple of hands before we dive.
Okay,
back into
Lisa, Jeremy, and then Judy. Lisa?
I forget which 8th century prophet, maybe Isaiah, I forget, but the idea of God rejecting disingenuous sacrifices, or sacrifices that God considers to be disingenuous, is in prophets. So yeah, I don't know if it undermines the Psalm so much. It does come from parts of the Tanakh.
Yeah, so you're talking about Isaiah is the one who really focuses on that. By the way, we don't know if there's one Isaiah, two Isaiahs, or three Isaiahs. So the same thing kind of with Shakespeare. We have a body of literature called Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, but there's a lot of scholarship that seems to think there might have been two different either authors or schools of authors. The same thing with the Psalms. As I've said, we call them Davidic Psalms or Psalms of David, which might mean that they come from a school of writing that reflects Davidic style, maybe, kind of a hashkafa, an orientation or an outlook rather than just the name of an individual. And some people have written that the concept of authorship itself is kind of a modern idea. The idea that I sit down, Sharon Kleinbaum, I write a book, I put my name on a book, and that book is mine. That might be, from the 1800s on as a modern concept of writing. It might be that in other cultures and in other times, writing was not seen as an individual thing, but rather you were a bard of a voice of a community. You either wrote things down that you heard and that was your job, or even you were a conduit more than it was your personal name on something. And that's also a very difficult concept for us to look at ancient literature, because we have this individualistic idea, who wrote it, right? For us, we focus on who is the author. God forbid plagiarism, right? You claim credit for something somebody else wrote. Well, that might be a cultural orientation. Let's say in the time of Isaiah, maybe it wasn't the matter of an individual prophet, but maybe it was the idea of trying to reflect a moral point of view. And there was this concept of a name to reflect that. The same thing with Psalms. So even the idea that there's an individual author might itself be a modern concept, so all of these is just to kind of loosen up our brains from determining certain things that might be indeterminable. So Isaiah has, we call it even first and second Isaiah, because there's such a big difference between up to a certain chapter and then after that. So we read from the book of Isaiah, which is exactly what Lisa Brown was mentioning on Yom Kippur morning, which is the same theme exactly. So if you look for the Haftarah reading on Yom Kippur morning, Isaiah famously says, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't have it right in front of me, it's from Yom Kippur morning, Isaiah says, "Is this the fast I ask of you? Don't fast if you're going to hurt the poor, or what I want to see you doing is I want you to be clothing the naked, helping the poor. Don't fast on Yom Kippur, but every other day of the year, you act in abominable ways." So exactly what Lisa Brown is saying, that concept of the integration of ethical and ritual is deep in the prophets, especially Isaiah, as she said. Okay, so let's look a little bit at Psalm 51, and maybe Harold will play out with that Neshama Karlbach.
Yes, which text would you like to go to first, Rabbi?
How about Mitchell? Do you have Mitchell?
I got everything wanted. Here we are. Let me make this a little smaller, actually. And since Jeremy had his hand up in any event, Jeremy, do you want to be our reader for Mitchell?
I'd be happy to. Forgive me, Lord, in your mercy and your great love, blot out my sin. Lighten the weight of my offense, free my mind from its burden. I am deeply conscious of my guilt. My sin is almost unbearable. My heart is breaking with remorse and the shame of what I have done. I know that you love the truth. Teach me to live in wholeness, cleanse my spirit, wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Take away my guilt, wipe out every last trace of my sin, return me to myself, and make me as pure as a newborn child. Fill me with peace and gladness. Let the bones that you crushed rejoice. Wow.
We keep on going here. That was
Create
not-
a pure heart within me. Let my soul wake up in your light. Open me to your presence. Flood me with your Holy Spirit. Then I will stand and sing out the power of your forgiveness. I will teach your love to the ignorant. The lost will find their way home. Lord, open my lips, and my mouth will declare your praise.
So what I want to look at today, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the difficulties of the text because there are a lot, and I'm very pleased that you all picked them up. I want to go right to how to make this text meaningful, since I won't be with you tomorrow. You're going to continue doing some Chavruta study on Psalm 51. I have to be at CBST by noon tomorrow, so it just makes it too difficult, but you'll continue studying without me. But I want you to really see these authors who ask this question that I've posed to you over and over and over again. How would I make this psalm meaningful to me? How would I take what is of meaning in this psalm and make it work for me? Now, some of the language in this, we might not, Mitchell is comfortable with Lord, and he uses whiter than snow. And we might not be as comfortable with that language and even reject it. But what he's trying to do is to go to the very core of what the psalm is trying to get at, with all the difficulties to it. So asking for help, which is very interesting, which is to blot out sin. So it's acknowledging that we do sin, first of all, what Mitchell is saying here, right? That sin does exist. Lighten the weight of my offense. Again, it's not saying here, make me not be a sinner, because I have been sinned. And that's a little bit of what Yom Kippur is about, right? Is not saying I have not sinned. We all have sinned. And he's very comfortable using the word sin. At CBST and in many progressive circles, you look at different ways to understand the word avera, which is a transgression, or chata'im, sins or missing the mark. I am deeply conscious of my guilt. And this is a little bit of what Yom Kippur is about, right? Is kind of taking the gauze away and looking deeply at ourselves. My sin is almost unbearable. My heart is breaking with remorse and the shame of what I have done. This is a person who is really, in a 12-step way, and consciousness taking a responsibility. Many people have asked me this question about, what about people who don't take accountability? Well, that's between them and God, right? Because our job is accountability, is taking responsibility. My heart is breaking with remorse. But how do we know? How are we able to accomplish what he's describing in this first verse? I know that you, the Holy One who has created me, loves the truth. Teach me to live in wholeness. So the shift here in Mitchell is going from being burdened, being feeling the weight, being totally conscious of all that I've done wrong. And now verse 2 moves into a very different direction, which is the truth itself matters. By my confessing, by my being honest, it is what we call b'shishim, a 60th of the job itself. It's an important There's a concept in Judaism called Bishishi, meaning a 60th, meaning in halachic literature, if you have a pot of a chicken soup on the stove cooking, and you drop some milk into the soup, at what point do you contaminate it, so to speak? At what point is it affected? And there's a concept in halakha called b'shishim, that if it's a 60th or less, you're okay. And then all throughout Jewish philosophy and law comes this context of a 60th, and it becomes a little bit of a metaphor. So for instance, we say, if we are sitting at the bedside of somebody who is sick, our presence alone, just sitting there with them, removes a 60th of their pain. If we are doing something just by showing up, b'shishim, a 60th is alleviated. And so so if we have this concept, I know you love the truth, teach me to live in wholeness, cleanse my spirit, wash me, take away my guilt. Notice the contrast between this verse and the verse before, a completely different energy. And what Mitchell is doing is a little bit rewriting the Psalm, absolutely, but that's what I encourage all of us to do, right? That we are writing it to make sense for us. Take away my guilt, wipe away every last trace of my sin. Now, how does that happen in Judaism? How do we wipe away? We go through a process of accountability, of confession, of restitution, if it's between us and somebody else, of asking for forgiveness. Return me to myself and make me pure as a newborn child. So this is a return to ourselves, the part of ourselves that are as good as it's possible to be. Fill me with peace and gladness. Let the bones that you crushed rejoice, meaning my bones which have felt crushed, now let them be full of joy. Let's go on. I'm going to open mine. I don't know why I have such a hard time reading from the screen. I'll read. I've got it in front of me. Create a pure heart within me. And I know that Cantor Nimi, we sing this line sometimes as part of Slichot service. Lev tahor barali Elohim. You have created a pure heart in me. And let my soul wake up in your light. Oh, but notice the flow of Mitchell's psalm. He is completely going from the heaviness of the first verse into light, flooding with spirit, singing, power of forgiveness. I will teach an agency. I will teach your love to the ignorant, and the lost will find their way home. And ending with that line, Adonai sifatai tiftach, Lord, open my lips and my mouth will declare your praise. So I think he does quite a beautiful job of reorganizing the architecture of the psalm. Okay, a couple of comments, and then we're gonna.
There are two people who posted in chat, actually what I had posted on your Facebook page yesterday. Monica Raymond says, I heard someone on the radio yesterday complaining about people working their AA steps and coming to ask for forgiveness and being told, leave me alone, don't remind me of this, let me move on in peace. And Cole Goodstein says, I've read that we are not supposed to ask a person for forgiveness if doing so would cause them more pain. And I thought, when I'm asking someone forgiveness, it's so hard to make it in a way that I'm not just dumping on them and saying, okay, I wanted to get this off my plate before Yom Kippur. Can you forgive me about something? And not knowing how that will hit with them.
Yeah. Well, so there are different things in there, and there's no hard and fast rule. It is true that if there's a situation in which there was abuse, or situation in which there was it's still tremendously raw, just a quick, will you forgive me? It might not be time. Sometimes more time is needed. Sometimes you can't go to the person who's been hurt because the hurt was too deep. That's true. And sometimes you have to really find the way, and it might not be the time. And what you've probably heard me say when we do the Ne'ilah and we go into the closing of the gate, understanding we have to ask for those gates to always be open on some degree. And maybe what this season will be about is a resolution on your part to make time this year to work on a certain trajectory of forgiveness with somebody with whom you think is possible. Some things take years, maybe lifetimes, and sometimes it takes our sitting with ourselves and coming to a place of deeper understanding before we approach another person. But understanding that it's a part of the arc is necessary. But what we commit ourselves to in this season can be different based on what the exact circumstances are.
Linda Solomon has her hand up.
I don't want to go off on a tangent, but you fascinated me with the Bashishim, and I'm just wondering if we could spend some time at another time talking about that, because that is fascinating
Okay,
to
yes,
me.
I'm going to interrupt you,
And
Linda.
why the
Sorry.
60th?
That's a huge, 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 huge topic, and it is a halachic concept. But yeah, that would be another discussion.
Right.
Now I'll see if I can find something written to share, but I don't won't be before Yom Kippur.
Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
that's a very big topic. And I bet you if you take Rabbi Moskowitz's Mishnah class, I think he's going to be teaching Pesachim, I'm not sure. But you could certainly discuss that with him, and he will do a deep dive into that.
Great, thank you.
You're very welcome. Nice
Sure.
to see you, Linda, by the way, at the cemetery. Linda came to
It,
be in person at the cemetery.
it was my pleasure to be there, and I have to tell you, it was an overwhelmingly positive experience for me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Joan Friedman?
Two things in response to what Linda just said. As a person who spent the last 2 days in the hospital, visitors take away a whole lot more than 1/60th of the pain. The line that really hit me with this was, let the bones that you crushed rejoice. Having some direct experience recently relative to that too. And, because I've noticed all my life that people can go through the same difficult experience, and one person comes out of it grateful to God and compassionate to other people, and all the kind of things that we aspire to be. And somebody else comes out of that exact same experience bitter, and hostile, and I'm in pain, and I just want everyone to share it. And so the question is always kind of, how do you take these difficult experiences and go someplace positive with it? And I mean, I've been fortunate enough that, if your bones break and then the surgeon comes in and fixes it, and the physical therapist helps you get all your range of motion back, which is something that happened this summer to me, it's a lot easier to be grateful to God for having been healed and being back in your life. I don't know how people do it that, where there's no repair.
So Joan, first of all, I'm sorry I didn't know. I'm glad to see you. I'm glad that you're up and about now. So good to see you. Those are huge questions. And that's the big question that I address probably most frequently in my teaching, which is, how do we deal with suffering? Not how do we deal with being well, right? Nobody needs a rabbi for that. But how do we deal with suffering? People suffer in all different kinds of ways. Life is full of suffering. How do we manage to organize our lives in a way that doesn't crush us? And that's a lifetime of work. And no question to me, after 30 years of being a congregational rabbi, not to mention my own life, some people I think are genetically predisposed to be able to handle some things better than other people. But I think everybody can develop certain kind of muscles to better than whatever they were dealt with at birth or from their family systems. Everybody is able to develop the muscles to manage suffering with less destruction than they might have before. Doesn't mean it isn't destructive and horrible. And that's why I study. I mean, one of the classics that I study all the time is the Warsaw Rebbe, this Hasidic Rebbe who taught every Shabbos. I read his drushot all the time. He was teaching drushot in the middle of the Warsaw Ghetto as people were being killed. How do you, so that's pretty serious suffering. I think different traditions, all religious traditions, have some pathway through that. Doesn't mean nobody of any depth is going to say it gets washed away like, that. But yeah, it's how we manage to carry the suffering in our lives is a deep religious question. And every religion works with that question in different ways. And I learned from all of them, by the way. But I'm glad to see you up and about, and sorry that you've been in so much pain.
Or
Well, Yeah, it was a minor cardiac incident.
I don't know if there's anything minor and cardiac in the same sentence.
wow.
As those things go, but thank you.
Good to see you, Joan.
Or Ezrahi?
Yes, apropos of your comment a few minutes ago about asking for forgiveness, is there a particular way to ask for forgiveness for those who are no longer with us?
Yes, there's some prayers, but also we can all do it ourselves, is by writing a prayer, writing something where it's traditional. That's one of the things we do when we go to the cemetery, but you could actually, if it's possible to go to the cemetery, we're told you should do that. If it's not, you can still ask for. Relationships don't end because of death. And we could certainly be asking for forgiveness from those who have died. And we can offer forgiveness to those who have died.
Hold on a second. Let me, oops. Dean Dresser.
Oops. Yeah, Rabbi, I love the song, and I love the way he reworked it, but I think that I love this thing about there's things you take to God, and then there's things you can take to people.
Yeah.
And I was thinking briefly about, crimes such, what David did is that he slept with a woman, then murdered her husband. So when it was brought up earlier, I'm just going with the literalness of that. We know those kinds of crimes happen. He had to go to God to ask for forgiveness.
And by the way, there was accountability. Because of that, he was not allowed to build the temple. So our tradition also says it's not that there's no consequences to our actions. We are told because of David's actions, he was not allowed to build the temple on the mount, even though he conquered Jerusalem and he founded it's called Ir David, right? It's called the city of David.
Right.
But we're told because he was a man of war, because of his actions, God said, you know what? You're not the person to build the temple of the Beit HaMikdash, the place of holiness. And so his son, Solomon, built it. So it's not that there are no consequences to actions, even if one does tshuva. Of course, there are consequences, and consequences are real.
Right.
Even if and this is what I so deeply respect about the recovery world, is because there is clear understanding. You still need to ask for forgiveness, even if there are going to be consequences forever for your actions.
Right.
Work consequences, personal consequences, life. There are consequences to everything we do. And so we have to live with those consequences. And we see it throughout, by the way, the Chumash, right? The stories of our ancestors. There are consequences to the drash I gave on Rosh Hashanah. There are consequences to the actions of eating from that tree, right? That can't be undone just because you might feel sorry for it. We have to understand those consequences and develop a way that it doesn't crush us. And that's why I always ask the question, when I am suffering or when somebody else is suffering, what can we learn from this? Because sometimes the ability to say, okay, there's something I can learn from this might be one access point in. Buddhism has a lot to teach about suffering and the role that suffering plays in the universe. and
Right.
that it is a teacher. Suffering can be a teacher, not just a source of tremendous pain. And honestly, I've learned a lot from Buddhism about that, which I've integrated. I've learned a lot from Hinduism about that as well, because I was a student of Gandhian philosophy when I was younger. And Hinduism has deep, deep, deep understanding about the role of suffering and et cetera. But let's go on to other people. And then I want to do one more psalm if we have one more version if we have time.
Donna Gray,
You just pretty much covered what I was going to say, but in my Havruta, we talked about how, we took issue with the idea of you ask for forgiveness and then it's wiped clean because
Right.
something has changed and you go on and you can't undo the past and go back to the way it was before, fresh as snow or whatever. But you go forward and you can decide to choose not to do the same thing again. Maybe it can't be undone with the person that you wronged, but maybe next time when faced with a similar situation, you'll learn and choose otherwise.
Exactly. And that's an important part of and I'm sure you've also heard me talk about the broken tablets that we carry both with us. The first set of tablets were broken, and we're told that those are as holy as the second set. And we carry those broken pieces with us all the time. You can't undo the fact that that first set of tablets was broken. You cannot. And it doesn't mean you have to forgive everybody immediately. And it's not superficial kind of forgiveness, because exactly as Donna says, there are consequences. We're not the same people. And we're told that tshuva itself isn't complete until we are faced with a similar situation and we act differently. So these are deep things. It's not superficial. And I think Harold's point is really important. It's not like, oh, let's have a quick, do you forgive me? It might be a long process. And also not everything in the world is humanly forgivable. Some of it we have to leave up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, let's go to, shall we go to, Lisa, do you have something brief? I just want to make sure we do another version of this.
But I took a great class last night on how evil is portrayed in the rabbinic literature, and just to point out that the dichotomy between whether evil is inborn within us, is part of us, or where evil is sort of this encapsulated thing that we can purge ourselves for. And I just find that tension very interesting.
Yes, I think that's an excellent point. Real and throughout the Psalms, right? That's a Lev tahor barali Elohim. You have created in me a lev tahor, a pure heart. Means every single one of us has a pure heart inside. No matter what we've done, no matter who we are, no matter the gunk we've layered onto it, lev tahor, each of us has a pure heart. That's an amazing concept. Okay, shall we look at Bernstein?
let's look at Bernstein.
Again, I'm trying for this psalm really to look at ways people have turned this psalm into a psalm for the season. I'm not sure it got mentioned yesterday, and I will listen to the class, that for the Catholic Church, this psalm begins the Lenten season, Psalm 51, and some of those great settings are because of the profound level, and they're called, Psalm 51 is one of 7 penitential psalms in the Catholic Church that are said throughout the Lenten season. I'm not exactly sure. I think they're all said on Friday mornings, but I'm not sure. I know 51 starts the whole season, and there are 7 of these. They're called either confessional psalms sometimes in the church, or penitential psalms. And Psalm 51, you could easily see why, and it's for us the Yom Kippur psalm. Okay, somebody else want to read Bernstein?
Can I call on Donna Gray because I'm looking at her on my screen
Donna Gray.
to read Bernstein?
Okay. Show clemency to me, dear God. I've sinned. I see sins in my mirror, filthy, potent in my gut, royal, mortal sins. I'm broken now, in pieces, on the ground, and only you who formed me in my mother's womb know human weakness is a part of man. So look away from what I've done and take me as I am, repentant, working on my soul, and get me out of this alive and clean, and bring me back the holy joy of being whole with you, so I can teach all sinners that the sacrifice you won't reject is a humbled heart, still true to you, still yearning to come home.
Wow,
Okay, thank you, Donna.
wow.
Okay, any thoughts or reactions to Bernstein?
Dean Dresser just grabbed her heart. And I see it in the picture. Maybe Dean, you would like to talk to us about that visceral reaction.
I just think that last line is so beautiful. That you won't reject is a humbling heart, still true to you, still yearning to come home. I think she's really expressing that the deepest emotion around when you're asking for forgiveness.
Yep.
Is that longing to connect.
Yep.
Wow. Sarah Siegel?
Yeah, I so appreciate the way she resolved the troubling verse that this part about who formed me in my mother's womb, and only you who formed me in my mother's womb, instead of, that original sin of making, I can't remember the prior sentence, but the literal one is about basically, the lust and whatever that led to my birth. I just really like this. Only you who formed me in my mother's womb know human weakness is a part of man. It's beautiful. Do you see how she took away the sin part of that? It's great.
Yep. I think, very good.
Ruthie
All right,
Berman? Oh, sorry, Ruthie? Ruthie, if you're talking, you're muted.
No, I'm not talking. I had to unmute.
Okay.
My heart is pounding with this one. I am a talker, not a writer, so that I have not responded to songs, but I'm listening and I'm learning, and I appreciate all of what you have written in this group. But this one, I would like a copy of, if I may get, Harold. This is me. This is how I feel. She wrote this for me, I'm almost sure. It's exactly how I am feeling during this period of time. And it so fits beautifully. I got the chills, my heart is pounding. It also fits particularly, only you who formed me in my mother's womb. My mother was physically handicapped. Having a child was a miracle to her. And so I so fit into that. I don't see myself as a miracle. Don't get too excited. But this was so me. Take me as I am repentant is what I have been going through during these days of war. And I so appreciate this. So please, Harold, if you could send it to me.
Ruthie, check your email. I've sent these twice now.
Okay.
If you don't have it, let me know, but check. I sent it last night and I sent it a few days ago too, all of them.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for listening.
Malka?
The line that jumps out for me is the fourth one. I see sins in my mirror. It says you see yourself in the mirror and you see yourself as someone who has committed this sin. But in a way, what's behind you, when you look in the mirror, it reflects those things that are behind you. And so you see your past. I think it's a very, very powerful image.
Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you.
Sarah Sloan?
I'm very struck by the words, I'm broken now in pieces on the ground.
Yes.
That's very much the way Yontif liturgy strikes me, particularly in this period between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And it also seems to me Psalm 51 is very, very early in the service. And it helps set a tone for the day of I'm broken, I'm on the ground. Now let me do what I can to clean it up and become whole.
It is early in the service, although, as I always say, you can take anything during these long services and focus on it or say it yourself at any point. But yes, it's in the morning service it'll be said on Thursday morning in the morning service on Thursday.
Shari or Simon?
Yes, it's Sherry today. Good morning. Carrying on from what Sarah Sloan just said about I'm broken now in pieces on the ground, which is so dramatic. There's such a gentle flow from that until the end where she's look away from what I've done and take me as I am, repented, working on my soul and get me out of this, alive, clean, bring me back the holy joy of being whole, bring back the joy. And she wants to offer it, share it with others, but she says, you won't reject a humbled heart, still true to you, still yearning to come home. It's such a gentle progression that I think that's what touches me so deeply from this dramatic breaking.
Yes,
to
beautiful.
And Barbara Grindell, and then we have to move to some housekeeping issues.
Thank you. Well, what Sherry just said, those are the lines, working on my soul and get me out of this alive and clean. So of course, asking for help, understanding that you need help to work on your soul, but bring me back the holy joy. It speaks to me. Bernstein speaks to me a lot. She uses less words to get the point across. It touches my heart. So that's
Beautiful.
it.
Thank you. Linda, I apologize. I see you. I see Linda. We just can't call on it. We're at time and we have to do some other things. So Rabbi, to clarify the schedule, you will
Yes.
not be with us tomorrow
No.
because you have something other you said you had to be. I don't, and so today is our last, but we will be meeting. I will be running Chavruta for anybody who wants to come, and we will go back to 51 and we will look through some of the translations that we were not able to cover together.
Correct.
Next week, if I am correct, Sukkot is Tuesday and Wednesday and the office is closed and we do not have class.
Right.
So we have class on Monday and then we have class on Thursday. And Thursday is an extra special class because Julia Lupton will be teaching about Shakespeare. We have several of our class members who will be doing some recitation. So it will be an hour class and it is not to be missed. And then, I hate to say this, we are at our last
Hold
class.
on, Harold, before you get to that, on the
Yes, yes.
20th at 10:45 at the end of class on Monday, Rabbi Moskowitz is going to come and talk about the class he'll be teaching in October for those who are interested. So he'll be there for about a half an hour after class on Monday. The same, stay right here. He'll join us to talk about the Mishnah Gemara class he's going to be teaching. So for those who think you might be interested or want to hear what it'll be like, so that's on Monday from 10:45 to like 11:15. Okay, sorry.
Okay, and then the final week, we have class on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We do not have class on Tuesday because it's Shemini Atzeret, if I am correct. And I'll be sending all
Actually,
the,
we don't have class on Wednesday either, because I think that's Simchat Torah. So I think we have
Okay.
class on Monday and Thursday of the 27th and the 30th.
so I will send this out. Hard to face that we are coming to the end, but that is it. And we have some things, Rabbi and I are talking about how to end the class. So there will be no sharing of Psalm 51 offerings. We know that some people write offerings as part of their study of the Psalm. Please feel free to submit them. We will come up with a deadline and we will do as we did for 30. We will circulate them. They will go into the permanent record, but we will not be sharing them here. You can share them on Facebook. For Yom Kippur, I think everybody has their link from, it's the same link as Rosh Hashanah, the Rabbi?
Yes.
I'm sure it will be sent around also. I'm not sure what we're doing on Monday. The Rabbi and I will caucus on what we will do on Monday.
And also Yom Kippur afternoon, there are going to be 3 sessions. We can't do more because we just don't have enough wherewithal for the support of it. I'm going to be doing a session as always for newbies at CBST, but everybody's welcome. Just a 45-minute discussion. The Zoom link will be sent to also. There'll be a yoga session that I think Corey Dane is going to teach to have a little movement in the middle of the day for those who want to do a little yoga. And then Yael Werber is going to be doing something geared towards the 20s and 30s group, Aleinu, but all are welcome about tshuva. So we're doing those 3 classes in the afternoon from 3:15 to 4 o'clock between Musaf and Mincha.
Thank you. And Julia, no, there is no class the 22nd. There has been, yes, Cole, there's been a lot of talk about how we could continue in small groups or one another, studying Psalms. The rabbi and I will be taking the rabbi's guidance on this, and we will get back to you. We certainly understand there's a lot of energy in the class to keep on studying Psalms for the rest of our lives. So
I certainly hope so.
yes.
I'm still consider myself an advanced beginner, so.
And I will say that I made a Spotify playlist for myself of all of the Miserere Mays in classical music. And considering they're all about 11 minutes, because it's a relatively long psalm, it is hours of music and it is gorgeous. I'll see if I
It's
can share it.
Yes, and people should really listen to this, but we're going to share now and I know people, if they have to leave, can leave. This is Neshama Karlbach, who's Shlomo Karlbach's daughter, singing a setting to this psalm.
All right, so I will see those of you who I see tomorrow, and I hope to see everyone for Yom Kippur.
Elohim, Lev Tahor, Brali,
You.
Elohim, Ruach Nachon, Chades Bekelbi.
Well, I think that's a very special offering, and I see in the chat, there's a lot about Neshama. We should not, first of all, her father was, it's, be careful about what we say publicly, and also just be cautious. She's not her father. She deserves that. Her career was ruined by people who wouldn't hire her either because of some of the things that her father had done, which isn't really fair either. And he was a complicated person. And anyway, yeah, so Neshama was supposed to help lead a service at CBSC and then do a concert after services soon after COVID hit. And I know that she does stuff on Zoom, but we really want her live. She has a whole band. You know, we want to do a whole thing with her leading services with, you know, with the other singers, you know, and that's very hard. Yes, she can do a talk on Zoom. We were going to then, she and I were going to be in discussion and have a whole talk about her father and all the issues to help give her, when COVID is real, when we can do that, we'll do it again, because it'll be wonderful to have musical, all the different musical instruments, which you can't really do on Zoom, as we know. Anyway, yes, she's very complicated, but this is a great setting. Okay. All right, blessings to everyone, and study well tomorrow morning, and I'll see you all